Welcome to the Space Marketing Podcast, where we look at marketing principles, strategies, and tactics through the lens of space. Hi, I am your host, Izzy, and I am so excited to share this journey with you as we explore the different space industries. The last few weeks, we have focused on the space education segment with educators and a student from Saudi Arabia. This week, we round out the education segment and speak with Ken Davidian from the International Space University. So, lift off in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Space Marketing Podcast. Information relating to our discussion today and links to the video version can be found in the episode show notes on spacemarketingpodcast.com. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. It will help more people reach beyond the atmosphere. Information in this episode is for entertainment and information only. Please consult a professional for your specific situation. A few years ago, I decided to dedicate my life to space. I attended an ISU conference in DC, and one of the booths there caught my attention. It was the International Space University, and I have been drooling over it ever since. I am very excited to introduce to you Ken Davidian, Vice President of the North American Operations of the International Space University. Good morning, Ken. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. It's always a good day. Yeah.
Let's start off with telling us how you got involved in space in the very beginning. I mean, before the International Space University. How did this happen?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, I mean, I wouldn't say I grew up as a space nut. I mean, I was born in 1960. I did watch the moon landing, I remember watching it on a black and white TV. My brother and I my brother, I would say, was actually probably more into space than I was when I was growing up. But when I say that, I was like 11, 12 years old. I remember watching a Super 8 film of the Apollo 11 mission, the very slow motion of the, Saturn V taking off and all that sort of stuff. Again, Super 8, so no sound, just all, images and stuff. And this is kind of what I remember. But I was one of these people who I just wanted to major in everything. I was into sports, I was into music, I was into math, I was into everything. And when I got to college, I kind of wanted to major in everything. And so I started off as pre-med, and when that kind of wasn't working because I loved chemistry, but chemistry didn't love me back, I sort of had to look for another major. And so I went through this workshop, this occupational workshop, and basically the thing I found was I was interested in things that fly. So to be 100% honest, I would have taken a job. I think I was hoping to get a job up in New England at a helicopter, kind of outfit up there. But my first job offer was from NASA Lewis Research Center in Cleveland, because after 20 years of not hiring anybody from the early 60s to the early 80s, I graduated college in 83. After 20 years of not really hiring anybody, they had a bunch of hiring in the 60s and it went to zero. And then 20 years later, they hired 163 people, all at the same time. So 163 23-year-olds basically got together at the NASA centers across. Well, that was just at Lewis. NASA was doing this nationwide. So I was part of this first bunch that came in 83. There was a second group that came in 85, and then the floodgates closed again. So my first job was in space. My first job was doing government research on liquid rocket engines. Space shuttle main engine was big then. Shuttle had just started flying. We were looking at higher aspect ratio nozzles. We were looking at different types of injector configurations, all this sort of stuff. So that was my world for the first, 6 or 7 years at NASA, was doing computational research and analysis and some nozzle design on rocket engines. So that's how I got into it, basically. And since then, I've been a space nut ever since. Well,
that is not the average story. Most people, they're aiming for NASA. They don't get, plunked right in there. So very good, very good.
I was not upset. No.
About that. No, way to go. All right, so now you are the vice president for the North American operations at the International Space University. So do you want to tell us about the university first and then the North American part?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot going on there. And so with ISU, so ISU was started in about 1987. Probably the seeds were before that in this Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, started by Todd Hawley and Peter Diamandis. Then Bob Richards came into the story. And in 1987, they held this first inaugural Congress, or this inaugural conference about the International Space University at MIT in 1987. That culminated in the first program that they issued, which was what was called the summer session program, turned into the Space Studies program. The first one was held in 1987, and it's been held every year since then in different locations around the world. In 1992, there was an international competition for a permanent campus, a permanent building, and the winner of that competition was Strasbourg, France. So in 1992, ISU, which was already incorporated as a nonprofit in the U.S., incorporated as a nonprofit in France, and they set up shop in Strasbourg, and that's where the central campus is today. Since then, we've added new programs. The Master of Space Studies program was added in 1995. The first executive space course was added in 2003. We started a Southern Hemisphere program, and this is why we stopped calling the SSP the summer program, the summer session. We called it the Space Studies program because now we have the Southern Hemisphere program, which was started in 2011, and then just most recently in 2023. We got accreditation, a formal academic accreditation for the Master of Science of Space Studies program that's held in Strasbourg. That's a 12-month program, then a 6-month individual thesis program. That is starting right now. And of course, we have a new program called the Space Sector Crash Course, which will be kicking off for the first time in the next couple months. So ISU has this history that goes back 35 years, and this is back in a time when there was one other multidisciplinary space studies program that was offered by the University of North Dakota. Since then, there's been a lot of people that have come into the space educational field, which is fantastic. So that's kind of the history of ISU. Let me take a breath and see if you want to ask another question before I jump into other aspects of it.
Well, and historically, there have been some pretty notable names that have been headed up on the university. Like, for example, Buzz Aldrin is one, and...
So we've got it started with Arthur C. Clarke, right? Arthur C. Clarke was the original chancellor of ISU. I mean, so personally, I was a participant in the second SSP in 1989 when it was held in Strasbourg. And then 6 years later, because I was so into it, and the SSP, you talk to a lot of SSP participants, and they'll tell you how it changes their lives. A ton of marriages have come out of it. Some divorces have come out of it. There's a bunch of babies that have come out of it. A lot of great, but it's all about the network. And so getting beyond kind of the deep personal relationships you form this great professional and very worldwide kind of professional network. And so when my wife and I actually were seconded by NASA to go work for the SSP and help run it, my wife was sending letters to Arthur C. Clarke to get him to sign the certificates, in 1980, 97, 98, and 99 when we were running it. But there have been a lot of big names that have run it. And we've had Buzz Aldrin as one of the chancellors. That's right. We've had ESA director generals as some of the chancellors. In fact, our current president, Dr. Pascale Ehrenfreunde, she was the chancellor just a couple years prior to her becoming president. And she in her own right is a big name. She's been the head of DLR. She's been the president of IAC. She's listed in the top 2% of Stanford's cited research scientists in the world. So we've had some big names. We've had at least three astronauts that I know of that have come from the ranks of ISU. Currently, the head of the Australian Space Agency is an ISU alum. So there's a lot of big names that are associated with it. We've got about 5,400 or so alumni from about 110, 115 countries around the world over the last 35 years. So there's a lot of people that have come through the program. And I think they're attracted to the program for a lot of reasons, and they take the values of ISU and they're helping to propagate those in the community, which is super important.
It makes it the baseline, It gives people
Yeah.
a level that, this is how we're going to run things, and this is how we're going to set that bar.
Yeah, well, and it sets, like I said, the values, and let me talk about the values here for a second, but it sets, choosing values is not a random thing, right? No. And you're taking a position. When you choose values for an organization, you're taking a position. You're putting a flag in the sand. And the values that ISU embodies, number one, and there's a general version and there's specific versions. Specifically, our first value is space education, right? But education, the broader, the meta concept of education is ultimately innovation. I mean, innovation is about new things, learning new things or being exposed to new things. And again, it could be that it's not new to other people, but if it's new to you or your society, it's an innovation. So the idea of learning new things, whether or not, it could be that it's well known in the community, but if you don't know it, and if it's new to you, it's all about innovation and learning. So the first value is this space education, focusing on space education and helping people innovate themselves. The second value, specifically ISU talks about the 3 I's: international, interdisciplinary, and intercultural. These are specific instances of pluralism. The ultimate value of pluralism is of accepting and valuing a bunch of different perspectives, a bunch of different sets of values, and a bunch of different individuals. And so I think the pluralistic value is one of the most important ones of ISU, because since day one, ISU has been built on the 3 I's. And whether they knew it at the time or not, these embody a value of pluralism, which is super, super important, I think, and it's getting a lot of airplay today. And the third value, of course, is for the benefit of all humanity. When I started my job in 1983 at NASA Lewis, it was written in the bushes in the nomenclature of the time, which is for the benefit of all mankind. And even when I go onto LinkedIn today and I see the background, the banner images of some folks, and some of them are focused on the benefit of all humankind. And this is, I think, for me, personally, it's a driver. I don't want to do things that are only beneficial to a given subgroup of a society or a single nation. My life has more value if I can contribute to the world. And so this is something that ISU absolutely embodies. And it's embodied in the NASA authorization. I mean, it's for the benefit of all mankind. And this is a term that actually came out of the nuclear age, used by Eisenhower originally. But that phrase has been built into NASA. It's been built into ISU. And I couldn't be prouder, because to me, that is what gives my life a lot of meaning, actually.
And I think as companies, I know it's a trending thing right now, but the fact of the matter is when you do bring in diverse points of views, then it just makes the whole team better. There's nothing out there that shows a degrading thing. So
that's an interesting topic. So I was a moderator of a panel last year at the Fusion Forum, which is a sort of a Space Generation Advisory Council activity, 2 or 3 day conference that goes on before the Space Symposium, which is the Space Foundation's big annual conference. And I led a panel on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the aerospace industry. And in preparation for that, I was investigating not only what are the benefits, but what are the challenges to diversity. And so there are challenges. There are things
Absolutely.
that bringing diversity into the picture, it creates, challenges and opportunities, right? It's 2 sides of the same coin. And so once you start bringing in multiple viewpoints, there's a lot more opportunity for conflict, for, things not going smoothly. And guess what? Managers hate that. So now managers, if they don't address the conflicts, they can create more problems than their benefits that they're trying to derive from the diversity. So there's a lot of things that go on in diversity that need our attention. But like you said, and I totally agree with you, that ultimately the benefit of having diverse perspectives is going to give you, if nothing else, a richer understanding of whatever situation you're trying to evaluate. So I think diversity absolutely is a super important aspect of ISU.
Well, let's move on to the easy part. It's easier for managers to actually do that. Yes, there are ways that are doing things the easy way, but space isn't about doing things the easy way. So when you do create a culture that celebrates everybody's diversity, and it brings all those different viewpoints to the table in a very healthy way, powerful things happen.
Absolutely. And that's what you have to understand. There's no just one way of looking at things. And when I was working at ISU, my boss at the time, Dr. Lucy Stoyak, she's the one, she's got a legal background. And for all I know, this is a legal truism or a legal saying. But she said, hey, listen, Ken, every coin has two sides. You have to look at least, the both sides of the coin. And a lot of times we're talking about phenomenon that have more than two sides, more than just, a front and a back. And so you really have to keep your mind open. And there's been a ton of studies on different ways that you collect knowledge lead to different ways of jumping to assumptions. This was in, I want to say Nicholas Nassim Taleb, or I forget his name, Black Swan was the name of the book by Taleb, where he wrote about if you get your information in a lot of little chunks all the time, you tend to jump to a conclusion sooner, and you tend to now filter out the things you don't agree with. So now you've got the confirmation bias kicking in sooner, and so now you basically have shut out any kind of other alternative concept. Whereas if you get your information in big chunks, separated by some time in between, you tend to jump to conclusions slower, and you tend to see more sides of the picture. So our society sort of has gone toward this. I mean, and it's not anything recent. Back in I want to say it was the late 80s when we ended up with the 24-hour news networks. Those were just kicking in. CNN was just starting, right? And we had 24-hour news, and everything had to be pumped up. And so now everybody started getting news every second of every day. It wasn't just at 6 o'clock at night when you got your local news and 6:30 when you got your national news. It was all the time. And so that it changes the way people see things. And so you're absolutely right.
And when you have an influx of different diversities, then and that becomes a common thing, then the things that do cause problems tend to get weeded out. And I'll preface that by saying, I moved to a little town at one point. Me and my husband, we moved quite a bit when he was in the military. And this one particular town we moved to, and everybody was the same. And guess what? Mm-hmm. Bigotry was alive and well. You had the city against the county. And if you went to a city school and then you transferred over to a county school, they didn't like you because you went to the city school. So it blew my mind that even when everybody's the same, that bigotry finds a way.
Well,
so
it's
in the culture.
Yeah. It's in and you wonder how much of that is driven externally. A lot of people will use those sort of divisions to advance whatever cause they're trying to advance. And so, I mean, it seems like it's a fairly effective thing to do. So, not going beyond that, I would say that, being open to diverse ideas is absolutely what competition is about. This is, when I started back at NASA, so my career had this crazy path where it wasn't one job my entire life. Believe it or not, and back in 1983, we believed as 23-year-olds that, it was our parents that had a job for 40 years, and that wasn't going to be us. We were going to be moving around a lot more. And I hear these themes repeated, again, very recently. But I was one of the people who actually did change jobs. I went back to NASA, changed its name to Glenn. I went back to NASA in Cleveland a number of times, and I saw a lot of my old roommates, not in the same office, but with the same office furniture in a different office in the same configuration. They were in a very stable sort of environment. And I get the benefits to that, and the psychological and even physical benefits to stability, and we try to do a lot of things to minimize uncertainty. One of the things the different perspectives kind of leads you to when you're studying innovation is that stability is a very uncommon thing. Change is continuous. Change is always happening, and this is the only thing constant in the world is change. Change is always happening, and if you think of the world or your existence as this flowing river, every once in a while there'll be these eddies, these little vortices, like the eyes of a hurricane that show up in the flow, and there's some stability there. But then they get washed away, and they might reform, and they get washed away. The thing that it's the change of the river flow that's causing the stability. So again, opening your mind away from this stability good, change bad, to going with the flow. There are two different what they call ontologies, different world views. There's the ontology of being, where the world is made up of physical things with attributes, and then there's the ontology of becoming, where it's a process and everything is in a state of flux. And these artifacts that come out of it, these objects, are just specific moments in time that we give prominence to, but they can take on totally different meanings when looked at from retrospect, from some looking back in the past, and they can change meaning over time. So it's a really interesting just way of looking at it, and this is kind of the thing about having multiple perspectives, and that's what I think ISU helps you, maybe not at such a philosophical level, but helps you understand that there are multiple ways to look at any science project, and this gets into the different departments that ISU focuses on. And this is one of the things that differentiates ISU from other space education programs, of which there are many today, and they're I don't want to say they're all great, because that's kind of stupid, but they're all beneficial, and I think there's a lot of good value to having many space education programs. But ISU, I think, is still unique in the sense that, we focus on the physical sciences, which are the astronomy, the cosmology, the heliophysics, the planetary science, the earth science, and all that sort of stuff. But we also focus on the life sciences, and not just the human life sciences, but also the botanical, plant life, and lower levels of life. And then we also focus on the engineering, which is kind of normal. A lot of space education programs that are available out there are based around an aerospace or a physical science program, and then they glob on some other discussions. So we include those through, but we also include policy and law. We also include business and management. We also include satellite applications and other space applications, and we include space humanities. And so, and let me just talk about space humanities for a second. There's a lot of people, especially physical scientists, who might not, who might poo-poo the non-physical sciences, the non, even, especially the humanities. They'll kind of dismiss it a little bit. It's not, it's not useful. But to me, I heard this from somebody else the other day. Science fiction is a gateway drug to space. I mean, and in fact, I was just reading, I was just reading the Hank Green novel today. It talks about how narratives, how stories change your mind. And if you want to use a loose definition of what a drug is, it affects your mind. Narratives absolutely change people. And you develop different beliefs, you develop different neural pathways, hearing these stories. And so, getting involved with the space humanities is a big deal. Of course, Laurie Anderson was the artist in residence for NASA for a while. We've had a lot of prominent artists that have getting involved with space activities, and I'm sure a lot more than I'm aware of. But this is a super important aspect, because this is what speaks to others that are not space nuts, like most of us. This is what speaks to society. And from the economics perspective, the thing that is going to keep us from becoming a spacefaring nation is not the technology. It's going to be the adoption of those technologies by society at large. And the thing that's going to help drug them into thinking this is a good thing is the science fiction, is the space humanities. That's going to bring them along, and that's going to help increase the adoption speed of a lot of these technologies and a lot of these ideas.
And that is a powerful marketing tool to use. And when I say marketing, I'm talking about getting the idea out. NASA was able to prompt adoption of the Apollo program because of their marketing initiatives, and being able to empower other companies to do their marketing initiatives to bring space to everybody. Because if space is something that somebody else does, that it's not me, is somebody else, and then it's not going to be adopted, because they're not going to see the value in it. And we have space in our pocket. This is one of the things that is my little hill that I die on, is we have space in our pocket, and most people do not realize or respect their connection. So space is so important to all of these different things. And as far as school, you talked about the business management program and all. Engineers are vital to any development of any widget that goes to space. Absolutely. But it's the support team around it, the lawyers, the business people, the marketers, that create this ecosystem that makes a business thrive. So
So in my studies, what I kind of focused on was how does change happen? What are the motors of change? There are specific motors that cause change to happen. And in fact, these motors don't operate by themselves, so they operate in combination, so it gets really complicated really quick. But one of the motors is called the teleologic motor, and what this means is there's some central agent that says, this is the goal we are trying to achieve. And then what they do is they go out and say, who's going to join us? By the way, here's some money. And so now everybody kind of falls in line, and they all accomplish this goal. And for example, that goal could be, we are going to land a man on the moon and return them safely within the decade, right? So this is a central actor-driven kind of activity. This is not the way commercial sector works. And so if we are talking about commercial space, we're not going to get there in that fashion. It's not going to be some central agent, aka the government, telling us where to go. It's going to be the public self-organizing in some crazy way that nobody understands to select certain products that take us to space and get us there. And this is kind of where I get excited is, thinking about that. And so the motor that's at work there is not this central guided, kind of forward vision that everybody acts toward. It's called what it is the evolutionary motor, the variation, selection, retention. This operation of these three forces. There's got to be a lot of innovation going. That's the variation part. Then somebody's got to select out which one of those are good, and that's the funding portion of it. Which one are able to attract fundings to develop it from an idea to a product. But then ultimately it's the retention force. This is the demand. Who's going to buy the product? I could have the most technologically fantastic product, but if people don't buy it, it's a commercial flop. And so, and the great example there, of course, is the Sony videotape Betamax versus VHS videotape. You could talk about the QWERTY keyboard versus the Dvorak keyboard, and I'm sure there's a bunch more modern examples rather than the mid-'70s. But the idea there is that the commercial motor of change is not necessarily going to get you the technologically best answer. And that's okay in the commercial world, but it's not okay in the teleologic world, because typically in the teleologic world, in that other motor world, you're spending the taxpayers' money. So now if you're spending the taxpayers' money, there's some sort of responsibility. Hey, wait a minute, you're not making the best thing? You better be making the best thing. This is where engineers and the physicists come in. But in the commercial world, hey, listen, you might have the technologically best rocket, but if nobody wants to fly on it, guess what? It's a flop. And so technology doesn't win here. It's the commercial viability. This is where marketing comes in, and this is where the trying to get people to buy your product. It doesn't matter if I've got a product and it just ends up not being as good as your product, but if I could sell it better, guess what? Woo, I win. And so this is where we're at, and this gets into reaching new audiences. This gets into, listen, we can't talk to the navel gazing, looking at our own belly button. The engineers and the physicists can't just talk to the engineers and the physicists, right? We've got to start talking to, oh my God, the people, right? and we're not good at that. And this is where I'm hoping ChatGPT can help me, but for the folks who aren't comfortable with doing that, then we need marketing experts to help us do that.
Well, and marketing experts, they look at the people and figure out what's important to them. How can I phrase this in a way that resonates? And that is one of the skills that is critical for getting the idea of space out.
It is so hard. Let me tell you, Izzy, it is so hard for somebody, and I'll talk from my own personal experience as an engineer, who tries to, trying to get the best performance. You're trying to make it the most efficient. You're trying to make something that's really, truly incredible. And, this is where you want science to look like magic. It's got to be incredible. And then you turn around and you find, nope, what the public wants is some crazy reality show where people are throwing drinks on each other, and that's what sells. I would never have designed that in my workshop, and there's no way in the world I even want to design that in my workshop, right? I'm mixing a bunch of metaphors, but you hear what I'm saying.
Well, and that's why I actually do what I do. Is when I first started my brick and mortar, I was in what was called an environmental technology incubator. And this incubator was full of geniuses that were creating world-saving technology to clean water, to clean up garbage. I mean, they were doing all this stuff. And very few of them made it out of the incubator because they didn't respect, number one, the power of marketing, because they didn't respect the audience. So what was the
Right.
point of creating a voice to talk to people they didn't respect?
Yeah, yeah.
But nobody can, if you cure cancer, nobody can get it, nobody can use it, nobody can fund it if they don't know you exist. And marketing is what makes you exist.
Right. It's yeah, I totally get it. And this is where multiple perspectives come in. The world is not going to be run by a bunch of engineers, because if it was, we'd all have a bunch of different troubles that are not hard to see. So yeah, I totally get it. Yeah.
That cross discipline is important. And when you're talking about diversity, I mean, the way that somebody in marketing thinks and the way that somebody in engineering thinks is very different. And,
Absolutely, and that's absolutely right. And I ran for 12 years at so I was at the FAA Office of Commercial Space Transportation for 12 years, and during that time I was there for 14 years. During 12 of those years, I ran the Center of Excellence for Commercial Space Transportation, and most of the principal investigators that I worked with were medical doctors or scientists, a lot of engineers, and I had one business prof. I had one person who was not a scientist. And it was a communication challenge that existed amongst the group. And, I like to think of myself, I'm an engineer, I'm a research scientist. I moved from the physical sciences to the social sciences with my PhD. But, I've got a theater background, I've got music background, I was an amateur puppeteer for a number of years. So, I tend to think of myself as having some non-technical facets in my kind of perspective. So I appreciated the difference she was bringing, and despite the managerial differences that were created, or the difficulties that were created, we had to work through some stuff to help facilitate communication, but we were able to get through it. And it's important to have those different perspectives. So you've got to, so the pluralism is super important. Yeah.
Yes. Hold on to your boosters. We will be right back with Ken Davidian from International Space University after a brief message from our sponsors. Please like and subscribe to the Space Marketing Podcast so you don't miss a thing. So we've already talked about a lot of the challenges. Do you want to tell us some outreach successes that you've had in your thing? And I want to kick this one off with the North American bit. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you're developing the North American arm of the university?
So ISU, like I said, in 1992 created a central campus in France, and over the last 31 years, the perception has become, especially from the U.S., that it's a European university. It gets a lot of support from the European Space Agency, and there's been this not only growing perception that it's got more of a European flavor than a North American flavor, even though it was started here, but also, even though everybody I talk to has what I say is they think that the stock of ISU is high. They believe in the outcomes, and they appreciate the results. Our visibility has decreased in the United States, and it's been more prominent in Europe. So my job has been to try to number one, increase visibility, and I'm doing that in a number of ways. I was reaching out to alumni for to do these 1 hour Zoom calls, just basically office hours, let them talk to me whenever they wanted, and that kind of fizzled out because I was getting two people. I'd be on Zoom and nobody would come on, so I sort of put that on hold. That wasn't succeeding. GDPR, I think it's called the General Data Protection Regulations in Europe, make it hard sometimes for us to get contact information. ISU alumni tend to move around a lot, so we lose contact with them and lose track of them. So I guess I'm talking more about the challenges I've encountered, but I think one of the things we're using is trying to use traditional communication channels to get to the traditional audiences, which have been the space agencies, the large space companies, members of the industry that are used to still working with emails and still working, via phone and all that sort of stuff. And we're also trying to work with, the new social media sort of outlets, not so new, but primarily LinkedIn, X, and Instagram, YouTube channel. We're trying to use those more, and I've got an intern to help me with that. because there's only so much stuff I can do. Yeah, I'm learning Canva, and yeah, I'm learning WordPress, and all doing all that sort of stuff. And this is the innovation part. I love learning, so not a problem. Give it to me. I love using the AI, generative AI tools that are out there. They're giving me tons of great ideas, and that's a lot of great support there. So we're trying to make things accessible to different members, not only of the ISU community, which is alumni, faculty, and staff, but also to new people. So we've started creating this new Space Sector Crash Course, which is a 5-day course that will expose people to those 7 departments I mentioned: physical science, life science, engineering, policy and law, business management, humanities, and satellite applications. We're going to expose them to all that, the past, present, and future of those 7 industries, which is a lot. It's a big story to give in 1 week, but we're going to do it. And then from there, we're also going to try to have some activities. I'm in the process of reaching out across the country to the contacts I've had through my Center of Excellence days, the different universities across the country, reaching to Canada and to Montreal and to Vancouver, reaching down to Mexico City, trying to activate groups of alumni that are there. We're going to try to hold activities, whether they're the crash course or just other type of networking activities there, to try to get people excited. And it's a big job. I'm one guy kind of right now with an intern, and so it's going to take some time. This is not an overnight type of thing. It's sort of I look at it as a startup, a regular startup. It takes 10 years. I'm sorry. It takes 10 years for a startup to become an overnight success, and any person doing a startup will tell you that, right? So it just takes a long time. I know of one company that I've ever heard of where they basically started a company and they have the opportunity to buy out a competitor and get all that competitor's customers with that buyout, and bam, they were up and running right away. That is so not normal. That is not the way companies start up, and 10 years is a good time frame. So I applaud those people who are coming to the space industry, now, and are saying, I love space, I want to do it. Great, let's get to work and let's, buckle down, because it'll take a while before we start, getting full night's rest, good
full night's rest.
calm summers. Yeah, right. I hear ya. So those are the outreach kind of activities we have going on.
And just so the audience is aware, we're meeting on Labor Day because we do not take off. We have too much to do. So but another thing. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you have to lay out boundaries, and people have got to have boundaries. I'm a very good boundary person, so I do play. I mean, my philosophy in life is based on a 1987, I think, movie called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And if you haven't seen it, I would recommend seeing it. George Carlin is in it, which is fantastic. But the basic moral of that story, there's 2 rules that come out of that story. And the first one is to be excellent to each other, which is the golden rule, which I think is pretty darn good to follow. And number 2 is party on, dudes. Make sure you're having fun no matter what you're doing. So I'm lucky because no matter what I'm doing, I'm having fun. So, so I do have time to play. I don't ever want to give the impression. I watch 2 hours of TV a night at least. So you've got to know what works for you. And it's kind of funny. I'm doing a video series. I actually have a YouTube channel that I've got 40 subscribers, and it's not like it's a big thing, but I'm finishing up. I'm doing a video on 36 different chapters in this Oxford handbook, and I'm finishing it up this week. I just got done reading the last 2 chapters the last 2 times. I've written the script, so I just got to do the videos. And I don't do professional quality video kind of stuff. I'm actually taking advantage now of the video production capability that PowerPoint has just recently added, and it makes it so much easier. I mean, I was using OBS and I was doing a whole bunch of stuff, and now it just perfection is overrated, right? So I'm kind of really trying to. I'm sorry, go.
Perfection actually is getting ready to. Here's just a thing from Izzy. Yep. I think perfection is actually getting ready to be non-trending because of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence doesn't do spelled boo-boos, and it doesn't do flubs. So when you see that rough raw, that boo-boo or that thing that's not perfect, it tells you that that's a human being.
That's absolutely right. And so my dad used to sell had a Oriental rug store. I mean, Persian rugs, hand-woven rugs from Middle East kind of thing. I don't know what they're called these days. But, I mean, one of the things in rugs was looking for the abrash, looking for the boo-boo. I mean, there was, a perfect rug is not necessarily perfect, right? That you've got to put, and in fact, the mythology or kind of the story we told was that imperfection is what lets the evil spirits out, or that's what allows humanity in, basically, right? See, and so this is, so what is old is new again, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. For me. Well, and space is my fun. So I actually have a day job.
That's right.
And so space is my fun, is what I do. So outside of work.
Nice.
Now, talking about content and doing things and being busy, the news, you have actually a journal of New Space Journal that you're editor
I do.
of. And,
I'm the editor-in-chief of New Space. It's a journal, and in fact, on our North American website, we just added a thing to it. And I'm going to reach back here to my little thing. Let's see, the most recent one. Yeah. The most recent issue is this one that shows the cover is ISU. New Space has been around. We're starting volume 12 in 2024, so this is our 11th volume, 11th year. I started out with as the associate editor under Scott Hubbard. Scott Hubbard is the former Mars czar at NASA. He was the NASA Ames Center director for a number of years. He was the original editor-in-chief. When he retired, I took over. And then just recently, we had an agreement between New Space and ISU. ISU has been contributing papers for many, many years to New Space. People from ISU have been reviewers on New Space, and then I became the VP for North America. So I said, let's get together, and so now you'll see a little ISU logo on the every issue. I was able to get the ISU on the cover, and so you're going to see a lot of issues there. Our journal focuses on entrepreneurial and innovation in space, non-governmental space activities. I mean, I love space government. It's been government-run space programs. They've been very good to me. But there's more. I mean, and it could be so much more. The government has a certain goal. They have a certain way of doing things. They have a certain responsibility to the taxpayers. So that's going to constrain them in certain ways. But then the private sector doesn't have to follow those same rules as long as they're not just selling to the government. And so this is what you see Elon doing. Elon can be entirely vertically integrated, and he can do everything in-house because he's not taking government money that forces him to have certain subcontractors and follow certain acquisition regulation guidelines and to fill out certain paperwork. There is so much activity that a company is required to do that has nothing to do with selling their product or marketing their product when they take government money. And they spend a lot of time and effort focusing on these non-commercial activities. And that's fine if that's what you want to do, but to me, the future is not going to be governmental space. It's going to be commercial space. So we kind of want to start bringing the commercial side. When I was at FAA, my goal was to create this off-ramp from this government dependence or dependence on government funding to a non-government sort of existence for these companies. A lot of what we might call new space companies today are just small government contractors. I don't see them as, the only thing new about them is their age. They have very low age. They're not 50-year companies. They're 5 or 10-year companies. Other than that, they just look like government contractors to me. So I mean, trying to get them off of that path and onto a different path is kind of, in my world, what a successful space activity would do.
Yeah, I'm going to touch a little bit on my world on that. In marketing is critical for that because in order to get you off the government road, you have to sell to the public. You have to have something they want, and that's where marketing comes in.
Yeah, I almost would be happy if instead of selling to NASA and any of the DoD branches, companies would sell to Health and Human Services, or they would sell to Department of Labor. It's still a government customer, but not traditional. I mean, NASA has a certain mission. DoD has a certain mission, and these involve space to help accomplish those missions, and that's okay. But I mean,
it's needed.
Can't space be used to help solve? Well, yeah, absolutely needed, and but it shouldn't be the point of their the company's entire existence. And so I think moving from DoD and NASA to HHS and Department of Labor and Department of Justice, getting them on as customers somehow. And again, this is the trick. I don't know. They obviously don't know, or they would have come to the companies asking for it. So again, this is the hard part about marketing, which is creating demand. How do you create demand? And it's a little bit of magic, It's a little bit of, well, it's definitely not a science, right? There's not a formula for it.
And use it, well, it's a science. Yes, exactly. The marketing.
I was going to take that back. I know there's.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, but there's an art to it as well. Yes. So you're
well,
right.
the problem with it, once I said it, I was totally wrong. Not totally wrong, but it's a social science. And this now gets into the difference between the physical sciences, the life sciences, and the social sciences, and how some of the social sciences are using the physical science models of theories and the way you write equations, their ability to predict. Some of the social sciences are trying to emulate that model of theorizing and development of science, and I'm referring to economics, of course. And and it just doesn't work, because in the social world, when I come up with an answer and say, aha, I know how this change happens, people are told that, they change their behavior based on that information, and now the whole system that you've been studying has now changed. It's this effectuation of theory on performance, and then the way the performance changes, now you've got to change your theory to, and so this is where marketing kind of falls into it. The same marketing routine that was great for Wendy's with where's the beef, is not going to necessarily be the right marketing attack for the pet rock, but somehow or other that took off too, so who knows what the secret sauce is, because the taste buds of the commercial world are changing all the time based on what they've tasted before. There's this effectuation, this performative aspect of social sciences. So it's a very complex thing.
And you can have the best message. You can say, did you know vegetables are good for you? Here's all the scientific backup. Here's everything that you need to know. And then people still go eat badly. So, there's what resonates. That's the art to it, is developing something that resonates, change. So anyway, we can go on that soapbox for a little bit. But okay, so where do you see the space industry in the next 10 to 20 years? Because I know this is very important for what you do and hitting the North American feet running.
Yeah, it is very important. And it's funny because when people start projecting into the future, one of the hard lessons that I've had to learn, or I don't want to believe, is that when people talk about years, they actually mean decades. So now you're talking about in the next 10 years, in the next 10 years, things aren't going to change that much in my mind. In the next 100 years, there'll be a lot of change. But in the next 10 years, the traditional aerospace companies, the Northrop Grumman, Boeing, Lockheed, these big companies, these are not going to change what they're doing. They're going to continue doing what they're doing. So in the next 10 years, they're still going to be there. They're still going to be a major employer. So a lot of people sort of, come out of college, they just want a job. So now they go into one of the big companies like NASA or, DOD or one of these large companies. And so they're going to, that logic, that way of working, those assumptions that are built into their everyday activities and who they interact with and stuff, that's all going to still be there. This new space is supposed to be trying to provide a different way of different logic. Sometimes people would say a commercial logic or a market logic instead of an institutional logic. Supposedly it's this different set of assumptions. We work faster, we use new technologies, we're not held down by all this bureaucratic stuff. So that's going to continue increasing a little bit. But like I said, if they're getting sucked into the black hole of this institutional logic because that's the way they survive, things aren't going to change as fast as they could. I think what we are going to see is the increased participation from people that were not born and bred in the space community, that are coming to us from other areas, which is great. So this is where we get new ideas coming in. This is where we start finding synergies, not just cooperation and competition, but now bringing different types of organizations together to work together and to accomplish things. So this is absolutely fantastic. And there's a lot of opportunity for that. And that's what I see really happening in the last 10 years and moving forward to the next 10 years. When I was participating in the so you mentioned the International Astronautical Congress that you went to in 2019 when it was in Washington, D.C. Phenomenal Congress. So when I took over the Entrepreneurship and Investment Committee back in 2011 for the IAC, there were scientists primarily, NASA people primarily. But over the years, when I finally had to turn over the reins from my benevolent, dictatorship, I was, finally forced out by term limits, and a new person came in, which is great. The distribution of organizations that are represented by the membership now, it's a lot of smaller companies, a lot of companies from all over the world. You've got a lot of people with backgrounds that are not engineering and science and stuff. And so, again, that's what I'm seeing. And this is kind of exciting because people are coming in, and probably the same normal percentage of 10% or so that are actually going to be successful long term. They're having successes. And so we're seeing some new things happening, and we're seeing some new ideas come to fruition. I love it when I see some of the younger members from the Entrepreneurship and Investment Committee, when I see them on LinkedIn as our CEO is just, done this or whatever. It's absolutely fantastic. And I get so excited when those are young, female, non-white faces and delivering this message of, to me, what is ultimately hope, to the world, and so that's encouraging for me. I really like that. And I want to help contribute to that through space education, right?
Through space education, because education, that's the key. That when you talk marketing, that's actually my favorite facet, is that you're able to impact people and leave them better than you found them with using education.
Right. It's a thing, and there's a lot of people that are not as curious as I might be, and they might be happy with status quo and just chilling and doing nothing at the end of the day, and that's fine. But our industry tends to be very dynamic, and to succeed in it over the long term, I think there definitely needs to be this curiosity, this inner drive to do things, to do more, or to do it better, or to try something new. And that's kind of where I think I want to major in everything. So
yes.
What's next?
What
can I do next?
Yeah, I call myself a knowledgeaholic, which is why I do this. It's because I get to learn about the different agencies and segments, and I get to learn about everything, and I get to learn the best of it.
That's nice.
And
it's all good. It's all good.
It's all good.
It's all good. And again, best and worst, just two sides of the same coin. You get to learn it,
Yes.
And being able to understand where the gradations are, and how those gradations change over time, and where the paradoxes are, and how to help balance those. I mean, I do 3D printing, and one of the things I 3D printed was this big wolf head, but I printed it in dark brown, and I printed it in white, and they're hanging out on my back fence now, because that's the what is it, the Pueblo Indians thing about the dark wolf and the light wolf. In the movie Futurama that Disney came out with, they started out with this thing, and they said, you've got these two wolves, one representing beauty and truth and honesty and all the good things, and you've got this other wolf representing all the negative emotions and all the negativity, and they're continually fighting, and ultimately which one wins? And the answer in the movie was, well, the one that wins is the one that you feed. And yes. I guess there's a little bit more nuance in that story, in the saying, listen, you don't starve one wolf. You've got to make sure that there's sort of this balance, because that wolf can't be backed into a corner where he's going to do something drastic. So you sort of need to balance the good and the bad, because they're ultimately the same wolf. And so they're both within us. And this is the yin and yang, and it goes into a whole bunch of, this is the ontology, the worldview of being versus becoming. The yin yang says the good has always got a seed of negative inside of it that can cyclically grow, and the two are within each other. And so just realizing that is a big deal, because we're not taught that, right? And so there's a lot there. It's fun. This is what I think about.
So, and the last question, this goes right into the last question, is what thoughts do you want to leave our audience with today? What do you want them to ponder as they go about their day?
Well, that's it, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want you to ponder ontologies and epistemologies and all that sort of stuff. That's a little bit too pedantic and a little too, crazy. It's kind of the stuff that I do. But what I think I would want to leave them with is the call to action, is to get involved. And it could be writing a science fiction story and posting it on whatever, Reddit, channel or whatever. It could be going into Midjourney and generating some cool art that you think could, activate people. It could be joining a club, your local Space Frontier Foundation, or your National Space Society, or getting involved with Mars Society, whatever it is. Take a class at ISU to learn about other aspects of space that you might be less aware of. I mean, a lot of engineers have been working in space, and physical scientists have been working in space their entire career, but they couldn't tell you what the Outer Space Treaty is about. So, I mean, so there's my plug for ISU. Find a course that's interesting and take it to learn more about space. Try to, think about the other perspectives. I think, that would probably be the thing I'd want to leave people with. Get involved and try to see space from multiple perspectives.
And let's follow that up with talk about the crash course coming up, and give us a little bit more detail about that.
Sure, yeah. The Space Sector Crash Course is a 5-day course. It's $5,000 for the 5 days. We're going to have 7 lecturers from each of the 7 departments. And these are big names in the ISU world, at least. And I wanted to put together an all-star cast, and I think I did that. It's going to be in Houston from November 12th through 17th. If anybody has a question about it, they can go to NA, which stands for North America, na.isunet.edu. You can go to isunet.edu, should be able to find a link to it there. Go to LinkedIn, type in International Space University Crash Course, you should find it. It's going to be, number one, it's going to teach you about the past, the present, and the future, about all the different departments. But one of the most important parts about ISU is the networking. And so we're going to have a big, big networking event. The beauty of the crash course that we're going to have in Houston in November is that this is sort of a pre-party, a prequel to the summer program, the Space Studies program that's going to be held at Rice University in Houston during the summer of 2024. So a lot of the people that are going to be coming to our networking event are going to be the high-level management from NASA, Hugh Johnson right across the street. It's going to be a lot of people from Rice University. It's going to be a lot of members of the commercial community involved with space activities in Houston. They're all going to be invited, and so this should be a pretty big event. So, and if people want to reach out to me personally, Ken.Davidian at isunet.edu gets it to me. Just Google me, you'll find me, or go on to LinkedIn, you'll find me. And I'm not a very good hider, so you'll find me just
You're
easy.
too
So
busy.
yeah,
I'm
not worried about it. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see more.
Thank you very much, Izzy. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
A special thanks to Ken Davidian with International Space University for sharing his journey to space. Be sure to check out his links listed in today's show notes. Please take a moment and like and subscribe to the Space Marketing Podcast so you can help us get the word out about this incredible industry of space. I hope that you have found this podcast useful for your journey as you reach for the stars.